Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Teams live event session. We are bringing you Microsoft 365, migrating to OneDrive and SharePoint. My name is Michael Palantonio. I'm going to be your host for this session. I am not the subject matter expert. We'll hear from them in just a moment. But I do want to introduce you to this platform if you've never joined a Teams live event before. So we do have some interaction controls that you can be able to interact with the speakers and ask questions. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there is a live event Q&A icon. Go ahead and click that now to be able to expand the live event Q&A panel. It will appear on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions throughout the course of this session, please feel free to type your questions into that live event Q&A. We will be reserving a bit of time at the end, and we have Mark Cashman, who is going to be lurking in the background, perhaps answering some of those questions via text, via keyboard, as we go throughout the session. But it is my pleasure today to be able to introduce you to Eric Warnke, who is the Principal Program Manager at Microsoft and the former founder and CEO of Mover, who's going to be guiding you through this content today. So, Eric, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the digital stage.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Warnke, and about 7 or 8 years ago, a friend of mine and I decided to dip our toes into the startup world, and we founded a company called Mover. We were originally trying to help individuals copy content from one cloud storage provider to another. And over the years, the need was just so great that we ended up doing a lot of enterprise work. And we worked very closely with Microsoft over the years, and so much so that in 2019, it turned out that it was a good idea that we were just doing that full time. So for the last year and a half, I've had the pleasure of working for the OneDrive and SharePoint family, integrating the technology that Mover built. And I'm going to go over some of the tools that not only has Mover built, but what is available today at in Microsoft 365, and also talking a tiny bit about the future and what we're going to be working on. Let me focus my slide deck here. There we go. So just to cover our bases, we're going to be talking about how do we migrate content out of SharePoint servers into SharePoint Online, talk a little bit about file share migrations, and then, of course, cloud storage providers out there. Now, before we go anywhere, though, I have a couple questions that I'd like everyone to chime in the Q&A section if they can. First of all, what type of migration are you planning? Are you coming from on-prem? Are you looking to do a cloud-to-cloud, perhaps between two different tenants? Just let us know, and we'd be happy to gather that feedback and make sure that it's aligned with what we're actually trying to deliver. Second question is, if you are moving from cloud to cloud, which one? Are you coming out of Box or Google, maybe Dropbox? I know there's many enterprise content management systems out there as well. So let us know what you're trying to accomplish, and we'll take that feedback to heart. Now, I'm going to start by talking about our SharePoint migration tool. This tool has been out for a couple years now. It's a standalone Windows product that allows you to migrate from any SharePoint on-prem or file share solution into SharePoint Online. It's moved petabytes and petabytes of data, and I'm going to give a little bit of a demo right now on how to use it. So let's open up Edge here, and as you can see, I have the new vertical tabs going. I suggest everyone give them a shot. In my normal, not private browsing window, I have about 50,000 tabs, so it helps me actually figure out what I've got going. So this is a SharePoint 2013, and I was told that we're bringing the news feed back, so hopefully some of you enjoy that feature. I'm going to open up here SharePoint migration tool as well. So the SharePoint migration tool, simple executable you install, and it enables you to do a whole bunch of stuff. So you can see that I have a few saved migrations. These are ones that I ran in the past when I was trying to set up the demos. And then it also talks about the migration manager, which is something I'm going to demo in the near future. So let's start a new migration. And so when we start migrations, there's a bunch of different options. So First of all, I'm just going to quickly talk about, but I won't perform a file share migration. So this allows you to access local content, shared drives, and copying that in bulk into SharePoint Online, OneDrive, or Teams. It's very straightforward to use. Just set up your folders and hit migrate. But let's actually do a SharePoint Server migration. So here, I'm going to go copy the URL that I should have had on the clipboard. So any SharePoint on-prem server, and we verify it. And I'm already logged in, so it shouldn't prompt me to re-log into that server. Otherwise, it would prompt for my SharePoint administrator credentials. And so there's a few options here. We can say, hey, I want to migrate literally everything. Now, since this is a demo, I don't actually want to migrate absolutely everything in this test tenant, but we can see here all the different document libraries, the different sites, and I'm going to go find this this test picture library that has a couple photos in it. So it is this one here, and then we hit next, and then we can have a few destinations. So we can migrate into a Teams site, SharePoint, or OneDrive. For simplicity here, I'm going to keep it to SharePoint, and I have a test tenant set up from the days of old when we were testing Mover, and then I'm actually going to make a -final edit because I've already migrated this, and we'll check that out after. But or should I name it -final, which is what everyone with their Word documents ends up doing from time to time.
Add more final. Add more final.
This ~1, ~2.
Version 2.
Version 2. So this will create that library for us, and then it says all the content will be copied. We can hit next. And then asks us to finalize. So it says, hey, here's your source, here's your destination, and you can batch them up so you can create a couple different ones and set up multiple transfers at the same time. And of course, you have options like I can name my migration. I'm just going to keep it simple, hit next. There's a host of options here, but again, I'm going to leave everything default for the purposes of this demonstration. And we just click migrate. And then this takes a couple minutes. But I'm going to pop over into our SharePoint environment here. So this is where we're coming from. And then I have, this is my old test here that was successful. And then if I go here, and let's refresh, and we should have another library. Let's look for that site. Maybe I named it incorrectly. Anyways, this is the final result. I'm not going to spend too much time hopping around, but at the end of the day, we will migrate the site, we'll migrate the pictures and the files, any list content, collaborations, everything. And that works great. It's a local tool that you can use at whim on any Windows machine. Now, let's continue on here. Did the demo. Let's talk about Migration Manager. So the SharePoint migration tool is a great product. It works locally, but sometimes you need a little bit more horsepower. And what we have created with Migration Manager is a cloud-based, cloud-driven tool that enables you to run many thousands of migrations simultaneously, distributed across many different machines, and you don't have to be sitting there monitoring anything. And to start, we actually integrated our file share scenario, and then we started to add some other cloud scenarios to it as well. And I'm going to walk through those really quick. In the near future, though, we will be bringing Google Drive, Dropbox, and and Ignite. And we're hoping to do that this year. So let's go into my SharePoint Admin Center. So in SharePoint Admin, there's a migration section in the left-hand nav, and this is the home of all your different migration options for OneDrive and SharePoint. And you can see a couple options. Here's where you find that SharePoint migration tool to download. There are other cloud environments. Currently, we link out to Mover, and I'll be showing you Mover as well, the legacy app there. And already built in as first-party apps is our file shares and box scenarios. So let me quickly walk over the file share scenarios before we go in depth on the box scenario. So this is the migration manager for file shares. Here you can download agents. Agents under the hood, for all of you interested in the technical level, are actually headless SharePoint migration tool, and they run transparently in the background, and you can install them on as many machines as you need to. And over here on the agents tab is where you would actually manage those agents. So some really good scenarios for our enterprise customers are, they would have a North American field office, they'd have one in Asia, one in Europe, etc. And they need to manage those, the content in those data centers and bring them into SharePoint. It's kind of hard to remote into every single one and constantly run the SharePoint migration tool. So we said here, you install these agents, and then you can just manage them all through one pane of glass without having to leave Microsoft 365. At the end of the day, our philosophy is really, you shouldn't have to leave the cloud to get into the cloud.
Hey, Eric, there was one question that I think is a really good one where you're at right now. There were a lot of feedback around bringing file shares into the cloud. But one specifically was asking, can I bring my department file shares into Microsoft Teams? So if they think about that endpoint, how might you describe how our tools help get from file shares all the way to Teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are creating tasks, you have the ability to select a destination, and you can customize that, whether it's via a CSV or you're just manually setting the destination. And you might have recalled in the SharePoint migration tool there, I could move into Teams, SharePoint, or OneDrive. And when you select Teams, it allows you to select which team do I want to move into and which channel, and then you can set those document libraries just like you would normally in SharePoint. So Teams is definitely a first-party or a first-class citizen when it comes to migration destinations. So moving on here, when you create tasks, just like in SPMT, you set a source and destination, except this task list can easily handle 50,000 different tasks. And this is something that has been tested at scale, and we guarantee many, many terabytes a day of transfer from your servers. But I could probably have a whole different conversation. Maybe we should, Mark and Michael, have another webinar just about optimizing migrations and how to get the most throughput.
Looking forward to it.
So I'm actually going to pop back out and go talk about our box integration. So in late 2019, Mover joined Microsoft, and we've spent that time since then making sure that our technology is available to all Microsoft customers. So we made Mover free for all Microsoft customers. And then we focused on integrating as a first-party solution into SharePoint Admin. And the first release of that just came out a couple weeks ago. And so here we have our box integration, and it's currently in preview. So when we go into it, this is actually one step ahead. Nobody likes to see login screens, so we've already authenticated a Box account. And so it checks if you're connected to Box. If you're not, you have the opportunity to sign in, and it's fairly straightforward. It's an OAuth process. Box has a little API key that we have to give them. And then once we're connected securely, and we verify that you're an administrator, not just anybody can connect to your Box account, we then automatically grab all of your Box users and display them for you. Here you can see this test Box account has over 1,000 accounts, and about 52 gigabytes. And we pick these statistics because these are some of the most important ones when you're trying to gauge how much stuff do I have, how is it distributed, and you know, planning for your migration. Planning is one of the most important things you have to be doing. At any given time, you can select a user and scan them. And when they scan, it automatically pops into our migration queues and starts looking over box. And it says, hey, what does this user have? Let's create a log and make sure that we can tell our customers, here's everything that you have before you move. When you are ready, you can select multiple users, and then you can actually, oh, this one hasn't been scanned. You can select users that have been scanned, and you can actually copy them to the migration tab. And once they're over here, this is where you can actually physically move the content. Now, there is not a huge technical difference between a scan and a migration, other than the fact that content actually moves. But we've chosen to make sure that they're differentiated here because we found a lot of customers, you know, you'll spend a lot of time running scans, making sure that you have all the information that you need, your users need, your management needs. You really need to pack that parachute before you jump. And the actual copying of content is kind of 10% of the work. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of our plans around helping you plan your migrations. So at any given time here, you can select a user and you can actually say, hey, I want to migrate them. Let's move Christy, because I know I deleted all her content. So you can hit migrate, and it will say, hey, we're going to start copying this content to your Box account, or to your OneDrive account, rather. And then this goes off into a queue for processing. And when it's done, you can actually check out the details. So we have general overview of it, last run, kind of a history, as well as breakdown of folders, files, data, which is useful for reporting and troubleshooting. And then every transfer has migration logs. Now, these migration logs are very important because if something doesn't transfer, you need to know what. You need to retain history for a record of what was migrated between two different platforms. And we've made sure that you have per file information on what a user has copied and exactly when. And if there's any failures here, we tell you. So here, this file failed, probably because it was 0 bytes. So this is per file, it's searchable, and you can see there's a history because every time you can rerun a transfer and look for changes. Migrations don't happen overnight. You might decide to do it over a period of time. Now, that was doing a migration. One thing that I should mention here is it's very important to realize you might not actually be migrating everybody in your organization, but you might be collaborating with them. And so what we do is we have what we call an identity map. And an identity map tells the system, hey, this is who they are in Box and this is who they are in Microsoft 365. They might not have any content, but they sure are collaborators on these folders. And so we want to make sure that they retain that collaboration so that you don't have to send a memo to everyone in your organization saying, please reshare your content, which of course nobody will do. And so it's fairly straightforward. There's a domain level mapping. So where we say, hey, anyone at this domain becomes this domain on the destination. You can map groups. Alternately, you can say, hey, I don't want to map this group because, oops, I opened it. But this is how you might modify it. And you can just search, you know, the different groups that are available and set them manually. And then you can also manually set users. You might say, you know what, this user is no longer with the company. I don't want to map. I do not want to transfer their content, or their collaborations. Or you might say, hey, this user is destined for an admin account because for whatever reason, and we need to consolidate all their access. We're going to share their content over there. Or it's simply the domain name changes. This happens all the time. Or user prefixes change. So this is who is migrating. And then the main list here is what is migrating. And speaking of what, we can go and look at Christie's migration. So we see in progress, and we see that we've created a whole bunch of folders, and we've migrated a few files. And that'll run until it's finished. You can kick off all 1,000 here. There's no upper limit as to how many you can queue at once. Mover will automatically, well, Mover is under the hood, but the migration manager will automatically manage the queues and the throughput for you, so you never have to worry about throttling or anything like that coming from another cloud. So that is an overview of the migration manager. And like I said, I showed you box and file shares. In the near future, we will be adding Google Drive, Dropbox, and Ignite as new scenarios.
Eric, there's a question
Sure.
about the same as to when is the near future, specifically around Dropbox content migration.
Yeah, it is hopefully the next quarter or two we will be delivering this. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, so it is actively being worked on now. We did a lot of hard groundwork integrating Box as the first scenario, and so all these other scenarios should be fairly quick for us to add, especially since now we are a first party. So as you can imagine, Microsoft is one of, if not the most secure cloud storage providers in the world, and so Mover was brought up to those standards, and that was where most of our time was spent in the past. So now it's just about adding functionality, which is fairly straightforward. So I'll conservatively say a quarter or two.
That's cool. And I think that there are folks asking for guidance around optimizing throughput and if they should look at potential throttling thresholds before they begin all the migration tasks. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is, of course, a very common question. One of the hardest things ever is going up to your manager and saying, you know, this is going to take a long time, right? Things cost money and time and all sorts of stuff when you're coming from one system to another. And of course, resource planning is super important. As a rule, Microsoft will promise, or my migration team will promise 10 terabytes a day before you need to ask us for help. Now, there is a whole bunch of ways that you have to send data in order to get that throughput. The way the migration queues work for ingest into Microsoft is you package data up, you submit it through an API, and this isn't the Graph API. There is a specific migration API, and there's documentation on some of the links that I've actually shown in the presentation so far. You send these packages to us, and then we promise in a 24-hour period we will process 10 terabytes a day. I have seen us do 10 times that for customers that have actually managed to send that much data. The hard part that many customers have dealing with is it's not just, oh, I have 100 or 200 terabytes I need to send. It's how do I do that efficiently enough that I can make Microsoft the bottleneck? And so there's a lot of factors that come into play. We talk about terabytes, and I'm talking about it now, but the real speed limit is actually the number of files in the system. I like to use the analogy of buckets. And I can say, hey, I have a bucket of sand, you know, say it's 100 million files, and I have a bucket of a few rocks, like 10,000 bigger rocks. And I have to go through each one individually. It takes a heck of a lot longer to go through the 100 million files than it does the 10,000 files, even if they weigh the same. So all the overhead around migrations usually ends up on a file level and not always terabytes. And then, of course, how's that data distributed? We see all the time, especially in cloud storage providers, some Google or Box or Dropbox user has got like the CEO has 90% of the content, and those systems throttle based on a per user basis. And that's something that makes it a lot harder, because when you request files from those systems, you can only do it so quickly, like a couple files per second thing. And there's only 86,000 seconds in a day, and it just, you can end up doing math. But if you have enough data, a good distribution, and your average file size isn't completely abnormal, you should be able to get 10 terabytes, no problem. That's our promise. And I have also never seen a customer do that much and ask for more and be denied. So this is something that that we definitely are answering on a regular basis, and we actually have plans in the future to release some performance type information around your migrations. We want to make sure that you're not blocked and you're able to optimize properly.
And one last question before you move forward. Sure. There's Clinton who's asked, does Migration Manager support a differential copy?
Yes, so it's just like SharePoint Migration Tool. When you rerun a migration, you can do an incremental. Same thing. It'll compare what's there, already been moved, and only take the changes. And same with the box scenarios too. So yes. Okay, so I know we only have a couple minutes left. I was going to demo Mover, but I think I might just talk about it here, and then we can field some more questions if we need to. So Mover, the legacy web app, you can visit it today. Any Microsoft account can sign in. You can migrate all your content from any cloud storage provider. We support a whole bunch of ones. The most notable are Google, Dropbox, Box, and Ignite. And the interesting thing with Mover too is you can actually treat Office 365 as a source. So you can do a tenant-to-tenant migration with the massive caveat that you can only do files when you're migrating. So there is no lists or anything like the SharePoint migration tool does. Mover has only ever worried about files, and that is what you can do. So if you can simplify your process or your migration down into, hey, we just need to lift and shift these document libraries, cool. Looking at the screenshot here, you can see Mover is very similar to the Migration Manager. We have a bunch of statistics across the top, a table with all your transfers. The difference is the Migration Manager experience is a highly optimized, better design. It does many things automatically for you that you have to do manually in the Mover product. And our goals right now are to actually integrate the remaining scenarios as quickly as we can into Migration Manager so that we can retire this legacy web app. But it's free to use. So costs nothing to poke around and try and run pilot projects. So please, please feel free to take a look. And then since it's very easy to access, we won't do a demo. And then, so what's next? What are we working on? I've already talked about how we're doing Google Drive and Dropbox and Ignite. I'm personally thinking a lot about what's the holistic answer to some of these, because some of these solutions like Google don't just have files, they have email and other stuff, and Exchange already does a really great job of migrating some of those, and I'm hoping that in the future we can figure out like a very nice packaged migration tooling where we can all work together and say, hey, you're coming out of one of these, you don't have to use multiple products. Planning and reporting, I touched a lot on this. Planning is one of the hardest things you have to do. We like to say it's about 90% of the work is just figuring out who's migrating, when they're migrating, convincing everyone to give you permission to pull the trigger on it, paying for the resources, etc. The technical transfer, that's been solved. That's a known quantity. So what we are bringing to you in the future are some really great planning and scanning tools that will help you quantify the different different data sets that you have, whether it's a file share or the cloud. And this will present to you great reports and enable you to make good decisions and figure out how best to plan. And so, as it says here, our biggest goal is to make sure that you have the most knowledge that you can get before you actually run the migration. And then lastly, SharePoint Server. There's a lot of little things about SharePoint servers that we don't support in SPMT, and we're constantly thinking about enhancing that. So keep your ears to the ground and watching the blogs and whatnot for future announcements of us just continually enhancing the fidelity. It's a goal of our team to make sure that all SharePoint on-prem customers are able to transition easily to the cloud. And we want to make sure we're constantly reducing the friction there. And that's all I've got. I think we're at time. I'm also happy to stick around for a few more minutes if...
Yeah, I was just going to say, Eric, there were two questions that came in earlier, and one is similar to one that you answered, but it has a little bit of a nuance. So in the context of tenant-to-tenant migrations, are you able to migrate teams to teams from tenant to tenant?
So again, the massive caveat is any document library. So any SharePoint-backed document library, which is what Teams uses, we can copy just those files. So we are not copying chats or channels or anything else. There are people at Microsoft that care about that, and I know are thinking lots about it. But inside the world of OneDrive and SharePoint and this migration tooling that I work on, we just will copy document libraries.
And then this one comes in the form of feedback, but it also might just be a point of clarity if it's not accurate or just in terms of where you might be headed. One issue with mapping destination in the Migration Manager is that it will only let you drill down one level from the root of the site. Like it wouldn't let you select documents, finance, legal, whack, 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 whack. Is that accurate? And if there is any known workaround or just thoughts in terms of future planning?
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely seen on the backlog, and I thought it was slated for this year. Maybe I've just seen a demo of it, but I know there are people that have received this feedback in the past. So just know that it's been heard, and we recognize that we need to be able to support in depth.
Yep. One more question, and then I think one just comment that I picked up on. But from Juan, he was asking, can we expect to have SharePoint on-premises migration support within Migration Manager?
That is something that we're still evaluating. We do have a great tool with SharePoint migration tool, and that can do a lot of heavy lifting. It will ultimately come down to what's the level of effort to integrate that into the Migration Manager versus the rewards. So I'm sorry, it's not really a good answer, but we're still taking a look. But it's definitely something that is on our desks and we've heard people ask for.
All right, so last thing for you, Eric. After you demoed the Migration Manager and then you switched over into showing Mover, you referenced Mover as a legacy app. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about that? Oh, well, I mean, I helped create the actual web app from the very beginning. I actually coded the interface. And so it was my baby for 7 or 8 years, which was a very fun and interesting journey as a sort of tech entrepreneur, if you will. I think the way I truly feel, though, is quite relieved that it's able to find a great home in Microsoft 365. You know, the people that I work with right now are amazing stewards of technology, and it's been nothing short of an amazing journey to find a permanent place for the product. So it also takes supporting multiple products right now. So we have Migration Manager and Mover and SPMT. So having Mover like reach its end of life will actually be great, because then we can focus all our energies on all the better and greater features that we can add to Migration Manager. So yeah, feeling okay.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. Mark, thank you. And we had Ankita on the line as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's been a pleasure hosting this session. Hopefully it has been as enlightening as it has been for me. There was some great questions. Thank you to all of you for your engagement and participation. And of course, thank you to Eric, Mark, and Ankita once again. This has been a fantastic session. If you want to relive the magic that you experienced here today, this session has been recorded, so give us a little bit of time after we end in just a moment, and it will be available in Teams through Microsoft Stream. We will also be sending out the deck in a follow-up email if you want to take advantage of any of the information that you saw in the slides that Eric presented. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. It's been a pleasure hosting this session and learning about Microsoft 365 migration tools and kind of knowing what is coming down the road in the pipeline and all of the integration of Mover. Eric, it was fantastic hearing from you. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.